I love a good story, and I love people who can tell a good story. And our featured guest today is Robert Raymond Riopel, who has personally trained over 500,000 students around the world, students of all ages, really in a number of different areas. And I'm going to let him tell the story because I don't want to step on his headlines, so to speak. But his new book is called Success Left a Clue. And with that, let me officially welcome him into the show. Robert, how are you today?
Oh, Bill, I'm doing great, and I'm just feeling blessed to be here and having some fun.
Well, we're talking from opposite sides of the border. You are in Canada. I am in America. I'm in Michigan. But as I've discovered over the years, people are people. It doesn't really matter where you live. We've got all sorts of issues that are common amongst us. So in your world, as a trainer and a speaker and an author, what led you to do what you're currently doing?
Well, first of all, I totally agree with what you just said. One of the things traveling around the world has taught me is that we are all the same. It doesn't matter on what culture, what beliefs. We all have things in our mind that do not support us. We have things in our mind that do. And what led me to it is I didn't believe in things like personal development. Not to date myself, Bill, but I remember when my brother-in-law, the one time, he said, "There's this guy named Tony Robbins. I want you to listen to his cassette tapes." And I'm like, I'm not listening to that stuff. But because of, let's say, dire circumstances, I used to be a Domino's Pizza franchisee. So it's interesting that you're in Michigan because, of course, that's where the head office used to be.
Man, Robert, let me just interrupt you for a second, tell you a quick Domino's story. I went to the University of Michigan, which is in Ann Arbor, which is where the world headquarters of Domino's is. And I believe, and I haven't seen the data to support this, but I'm pretty sure that for a span of time in the late 80s, I single-handedly kept Domino's afloat.
To that, I have no doubt, right? Because, pizza, I love pizza. I can still eat it 7 days a week. And I love being a Domino's Pizza franchisee because, at the age of 20, when I needed a job, I started delivering pizza. And out of necessity, the pizza delivery was making me pretty good money. But all of a sudden, I became a manager because I wanted something. I was raised that if you work hard and stay loyal to a company, that company's going to take care of you. But by the time I was 21, I'd been laid off from 3 different companies. And thank goodness I learned way back then, Bill, that probably one of the greatest lessons I could learn. If I wanted any kind of success, I had to take control of it myself. And out of necessity, I started delivering pizza, went from being a driver to a manager. And then a manager, I qualified to be a franchisee. Because one of the things I love about Domino's is you can't just buy a franchise. You actually have to qualify. You have to successfully manage a store for at least a year, meet a bunch of criteria. And so my wife and I became franchisee qualified at the age of 23. And we ended up buying our first 2 stores. And we did it with no money of our own. There's no way we should have been able to do it. But one of the things that works for me is I have passion. And if there's something I want to accomplish, nothing's going to stop me. And so we found out a way to be able to buy stores on our own. And looking back, we never should have been able to be successful because we knew how to run a store, but we didn't know business. And we didn't know bookkeeping. We didn't know any of that. We knew, there's money in the bank. Guess what? That must mean we're doing okay. And a couple of years later, when we started really doing the book, people looked at us and said, "How did you stay afloat?" And part of it is, both my wife and I, youngest of our families, we came from very poor families. And if money was tight, we still made it work. And that's what we naturally just started doing. And so all of a sudden, we started making some pretty good money, but we started spending it even more. And by the time we were franchisees for 8 years, we were now $150,000 in debt and going down quickly. And I don't know if you would agree or have experienced it, Bill, but financial stress has got to be one of the worst stresses out there for people.
Yeah, we hear that quite a bit. In fact, another program that I host is called Marriage Talk, where a licensed counselor answers questions from listeners. I just facilitate the conversations. I am not the expert, believe me. But financial stress is such a frequent source of angst in relationships. Yeah. And you reminded me, you said at age 23, you were a franchisee qualified and you dove in with both feet. You don't know how you did it. You don't know how you pulled the money together, but you did and you got in. Part of me wonders if the old "be careful what you wish for" axiom comes into play there, because it's awesome to be able to grasp hold and say that I am now a business owner, I am an entrepreneur, and then you walk in the store where you turned the key to open the door and you go, what have I gotten into? How long did that
Yeah,
take before that feeling kicked in?
I would say the honeymoon period was a good couple of years. And because one of the statistics that Domino's love to tell people is that the average franchisee was 23 years of age because you had to qualify. And 95% of us started as drivers. But the statistic they didn't like to tell people is that the average new franchisee would go bankrupt within 6 months.
we left out one important point.
Yeah. And what a lot of it was is when you're the manager and someone else is paying the bills, you're not worried about paying bills. You're running the system. And if you're making a profit and your numbers are going up, you're qualifying. But all of a sudden when that responsibility is put on you, and here's what would happen with most people, Bill, and this is why I love teaching people that follow the system. One of the things I absolutely love about Domino's is the system. And what new franchisees would do, though, is ego would kick in. I'm now the owner. I'll do it my way.
Yeah.
And those are the people that would then fall apart. One of the last things my wife and I did at the 9-year mark of being franchisees, just before we sold our last store, is we were actually living in our RV, traveling around North America, going into stores that were bankrupt or about to go bankrupt. We'd walk in, and within 3 months, we could turn around and walk out, and the store's sales and profits were going up by over 100%. And people going, you guys are geniuses. And we're like, no, we're not. We're cutting out all the crap, and we're going back to the system. Because Tom Monahan created a beautiful system. And if you followed it, the stores did well. And so we're $150,000 in debt, and we knew we weren't enjoying Domino's Pizza anymore, because that's a big belief. If you don't enjoy doing something, do something different. And we realized one of the reasons we were getting more and more into debt is we weren't enjoying Domino's Pizza anymore. So our natural thought was, well, let's do another franchise. We know franchises. But the silly part is we had no money to do another franchise. But we went to a franchise fair. We looked at all the booths. Nothing resonated. But 2 weeks later, all of a sudden we get a letter in the mail. I don't know if your listeners remember what actually getting a letter in the mail looked like.
A little box out by the road. I don't know what happens with it, but.
Right, yeah. And there's a letter in the mail from one of the booths saying, thank you for visiting our booth. Here's 2 tickets to an amazing evening. Each ticket is $39 value. It's our gift to you. And it was the only reason I showed up to this evening is because I could not waste, thank goodness, my mind would not let me waste $39 tickets. But my mind knew I was about to change. So both my wife and I physically got ill that day. And we only showed up because of the value on the tickets. We walk in 3 hours later, our minds were blown open. And the gentleman offered a 3-day weekend. And we went running to the back and we paid $600, which we did not have. We did not have, but we knew we had to be there. That was in March of 2001. June of 2001, we go to the 3-day weekend. And the sole reason we showed up was to get our money back. And I was ready for a fight. I'm like, come on, tell me I can't get my money back.
You showed up because you literally wanted a refund on the $600?
Yeah, because again, we got sick and my mind's going, we can't do this. I'll just get our money back. See, your mind's very, very powerful. And I was ready for them to tell me I couldn't get it back. And the girl who was doing registration had that deer in the headlight look, like, and
yeah,
she's like,
people aren't coming here to get their money back. They're coming here enthused. They can't wait for whatever it is to start.
Yep. So she called over the nicest woman in the world, who later became a great friend. And she knew what was going on in our heads. And she said, look, there's nothing I can do right now. However, come in until lunchtime. I'll have answers by then. And we're like, okay, if we have to. And we went in, and by lunchtime, we're feeling energized. We're loving what we're doing. And she finds us at lunchtime. She goes, oh, there you are. Let's talk about your refund. And I'm like, get away from me. I don't want a refund. What are you talking about? That weekend changed our life because we took what we learned, especially about who we were inside, why we spent money the way we did. And we ended up being able to go from over $150,000 in debt and stressed out beyond belief to actually retired completely financially free 9 months later at the age of 32.
Okay, that's a fairly aggressive transformation, right? And that change doesn't happen just because of enthusiasm. There had to be some X's and O's, some nuts and bolts that you
Yes.
took away that you began to implement into your life that helped lead to that. Because you can be as enthusiastic as you want to. And in fact, there are a lot of multi-level marketing scams that prey on those emotional surges, and people invest because they're given this promise of great return on the other end. So let's start digging into some of the things you learned that were really practical implications and are part of your book, Success Left a Clue. What was it that you learned that changed your trajectory from being in the red to doing it the right way?
Well, probably the biggest one was we realized our spending habits. We had, as we got more successful, we had all the toys. So we had 2 vehicles. But the funny thing is, my wife and I work together, always have. So we were always using one vehicle only, but we had 2 vehicles with all the payments. Our one store was in a lake community. So we had a boat. We couldn't use the boat because it was our busy time of the year when boating season was. So it sat there and looked pretty with all the expenses. So we made a decision, and it was one of the things that we learned early on. Rich people, they think long term. Poor people think short term, instant gratification. And we were all about the instant gratification. So my wife and I sat down and we said, let's take a hard look at our expenses. What don't we need right now that if we were to get rid of it and drop our expenses down, we could get to financial freedom quicker? And we sold one of the cars right away. We sold the boat right away. We started chunking away things that we wanted them, but we didn't need them. And we dramatically looked at our month-to-month expenses, knocked them right down. And because we had learned about passive income, money working instead of you, I was used to one form of income. You work your butt off, that's the income. I never knew you could get money working for you. And so we started looking at what kind of passive incomes, and we found 2 passive incomes that all of a sudden, and here's a definition for your listeners, Bill. What people think of financial freedom, they think that means we are instantly wealthy. But we weren't. What financial freedom is when your passive income becomes greater than your expenses. That's when you're financially free. Because if you don't want to work, you still have enough income coming in to pay for your daily livelihood.
Yeah.
So at 9 months, we became financially free. Did we still have debts? Yes. Did we have a lot of money? No, we were financially free. But here's the interesting part. Go ahead.
Well, I'm going to jump in for a second because we have to take our first break, but it sounds very similar. And I don't know, maybe you were attending a Dave Ramsey event. I'm not sure if that's what this was, but it sounds somewhat similar in that we're talking about need versus want. And those are 2 very different things. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Our special guest is Robert Raymond Riopel. His book is called Success Left a Clue, and we'll continue with him here on The Big Impact after this. Our guest on The Big Impact has learned a lot of lessons the hard way in life, having been in 6-figure red ink debt, drowning under it all, to thankfully turning things around and becoming one who instructs students of all ages all over the world in how you can actually make that change, make those changes. There are a few steps that we're going to dig into here in the moments ahead. Robert Riopel was just sharing with us how he, at the age of 23, was a franchisee in a national pizza chain, felt like he had the world by the tail, and then the tail got awfully expensive. And the red ink started to flow until a very important event that he attended kind of recalibrated the thinking process on need versus want. And Robert, I'm reminded of a passage in scripture that says that God will supply all of your needs according to his riches, but nowhere in scripture does it say he'll supply everything you want. Because if we got everything we want, it would be the old tale of the Midas touch and everything would turn to gold and we would have nothing left. So
Oh,
how long do you think that process took you to not the financial side of it, but the emotional and the mental and the prioritizing, the recalibration between you and your wife and what you would spend on? How long did that take to reset?
well, that's the kind of cool thing is a change like that can be done instantly. That's actually the easy part. The hard part is the maintenance, the maintaining of it. Because, and I'll use an example, a friend of mine does a great talk called Algorithm. And if a lot of people got upset from the documentary that came out around how the different Facebooks and Google, their algorithms are watching everything we do, and our feeds get given to us based on what we're looking at. And people are like, how can they do that? Why are they doing that? And he took a different approach. He said, don't you realize that's got to be the greatest version and example of law of attraction in the world? Because here's what I want you to do. Go on to Facebook and start only liking posts that you really like. Don't respond to something that aggravates you, because by responding, you're going to tell the algorithm you want more of that. And you'll see the changes instant. You'll instantly see your feed change. And that's what happened for us. But the hard part is now staying with it. Because most people will change quickly, but then they fall back into their old habits, their old ways of doing it. And so for us, the change did come very quickly. But then because we made a commitment that even though it's tough for us, even though we may want something, we're going to look at the financial side of it first because we have that long-term goal. We maintained, and I didn't know what a mastermind was, but as soon as I did, I was like, what masterminds can we be part of? I want to surround ourselves with other people that have the same beliefs as us. Because I came from a family where it was when we became Domino's Pizza franchisees, they were like, what are you doing? Don't you know that's risky? How are you going to make it work?
But
You
you
need to
knew
get
better.
a job.
But you knew better, right?
Well, back then it was just something told me I had to do it, and it was ego, a lot of it. It's like, no, I'm going to be a business owner. But I'm a big believer that everything happens for a reason. And a lot of people have heard that, but maybe the part they haven't heard, Bill, is the second part, because that's an incomplete statement that everything happens for a reason. The full statement is actually everything happens for a reason, and that reason is there to serve me. And when you look at it that way, you look for a lesson in everything. So people go, well, Robert, would you ever do Domino's Pizza again? And I'm like, I'll never go into a retail business like that again. But I'm glad I did, because the lessons I learned, especially at such a young age, has made me who I am today. Those life experiences I can't replace.
Right.
And I choose not to replace. So to answer that question, it happens quick for the change, but maintaining is where the work really comes in.
Well, as you describe it, it reminds me of something as common as a nutritional plan or a diet, and somebody who wants to lose weight, and they're all motivated. It's the reason why you see every November and December so many commercials for fitness centers, because they know you're approaching resolution time.
Yep.
And if you go to a gym in January and February in normal times, it is packed. You go back to the same gym, same day, same time, go mid-April, back to normal. It's right where it is. Because the perseverance to stick with a commitment is such a huge part of really every part of life. And so as you kind of capsulized all of these things into Success Left a Clue, I'm going to have you walk us into what that title means. What are the clues that you're talking about? Because I know that's a big part of your presentation, and you've taken that message around the world to audiences about, delivering them one clue at a time. What are the clues?
Well, one of them came right from Domino's Pizza. Most people, one of the reasons they struggle is because of the fact that they see a system in place and they try to reinvent it. They try to reinvent the wheel. So one of my clues is, if you're going to reinvent the wheel, do it later. Do it later. Follow the system, get the success first. And then once you're successful, if you still want to reinvent it, then do it. So you're a golfer. So imagine you wanting to be a pro golfer, but the first couple times you hit the ball and you maybe get a good hit, you go, see, doing it my way, I'm going to work better. And you don't listen to the person trying to teach you how the swing should look, how to judge your distance, how to decide what clubs to use. You decide, I'm just going to do it on my own. And then you wonder why you struggle. And so I made a career of watching successful people and seeing what they have in common. And that's where I'm looking at their success. And to be clear, it's not just the things that worked for them, but it's really focusing on the things that didn't.
Right.
So that then we can help people avoid those.
I'm so glad you said that, because there are so many valuable lessons to be learned from failure. And it doesn't always have to be your own failure. You can study what somebody else did poorly and say, all right, now I don't have to walk that same path because I saw them fall off the cliff. I especially want to make sure that the younger listeners in our audience are paying attention to that, because you're never smarter. And you alluded to it yourself when you were 23 years old. You're never smarter than when you first come out of college, than when you first head out as an adult. Your parents are never dumber to you than that moment, because you've got it all in front of you. And now that I'm 53, I look back at just some of the, maybe not the decisions, but maybe just the mindset and the attitude that I had. It was a very arrogant attitude. And I'd like to think that I've grown past that. But part of that process of growing past that is observing so many others in my sphere. They just know everything, and they're never going to give an inch, and they're wrong, and they're losing all the time. And you're like, could you just stop doing what you're doing? So you learned it kind of the hard way, but thankfully you pulled out of that. And that's one of the things I know that you're bringing to your audiences.
Yeah. And a big part of it is I realized I'm not going to change people. So when I'm looking at them, like you just said, and going, you can see it so clear that they're wrong. I also understand it's part of their journey. And so I've got to be on my journey. And, like step number 2 in my book, because it's 6 steps, is find a mentor, find someone to model. And one of the things that sticks most people up, though, is they go, yeah, but Robert, I asked someone to mentor me and they said no. Well, get creative.
Right.
I went to my mentor, when I knew I wanted to be a trainer, I knew I wanted to impact lives. Because here was my belief that it started with, is I felt that if I could help even one person do what my wife and I had been able to do, go from financial struggle to financial success, it would make it all worthwhile. And I knew I wanted to learn from the person who had taught me. And I went up to him one day and I said, my wife and I had been volunteering, helping him at all his events. And I went up to him and I said, I have a question. He goes, what is it? I said, would you mentor me? He thought for a moment. He said, no. 1, I don't have the time. And 2, it would cost you about $1 million for me to do one-on-one mentoring. Now, Bill, I was pissed. I was cordial to him, everything like that. But when my wife and I were alone, I went off the deep end of how dare he, we've been volunteering, we've been at every event, we've been giving, how dare he say no? And my wife let me vent. She let me vent. I'm like, we're never volunteering for him again. And she sat there quietly, and when we're done, she looked at me and she goes, are you done? I'm like, what do you mean am I done? She goes, are you done? She goes, okay, get it out. You're obviously not done. I finally get it all out. And she goes, now, first of all, wrong answer. I'm like, what do you mean wrong answer? She goes, we're not going to stop volunteering. We're going to volunteer more. And I thought she had gone off the deep end. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, well, first of all, you're telling me that you're upset that he spoke his truth to you. He said he doesn't have the time and it would cost us $1 million. Do we have $1 million to pay out? And I'm like, no. She goes, so I get why you're upset. She goes, but let me ask you a question. When you're watching him on the stage, do you learn? I'm like, of course I learn. She said, we're going to volunteer more now so you can watch him even more. He's going to mentor us whether he knows it or not. And all of a sudden it was like that one habit clap. I got it. Yeah. And all of a sudden I became his personal assistant, shining his shoes, pressing his shirt, getting him his food, making sure he was on stage and had everything he needed on time. And I learned so much, and it hit home where after doing 2-3 day weekends in a row with him, being his personal assistant, One of his staff members came up. Oh, you remember the same woman that was the nicest woman in the world that got me to stay? We're now good friends with her. She comes up and she goes, Roxanne wanted me to mention something to you. And Roxanne's my wife. I said, what's that? She wanted me to point something out to you. Do you realize in the last 5 weeks, you spent more one-on-one time with him than anyone in the office has in a year combined?
And so mission accomplished without the $1 million invoice coming on the other side of it.
Yeah. And he put me on the stage for the first time in 2002. And all of a sudden I became his assistant trainer. All of a sudden I was the first person to ever train his material other than him. And then I helped train all the trainers around the world that they use. And that put me for the last 18 years being blessed to be in front of audiences of 100 to 6,000 at a time, teaching them about mindset, teaching them about financial freedom, teaching them how to really design the life that they truly want.
Our guest here on The Big Impact is Robert Raymond Riopel, and his book is called Success Left a Clue, 6 Life-Changing Habits. They're real, they're relevant, and they're repeatable. And I think that's a subject or a concept we need to dive into in our final few moments here, Robert, because real, relevant, and repeatable means that you can actually do these things. Nothing drives me more insane than somebody giving advice that's completely unrealistic. You know, you'll hear every once in a while, you'll hear, maybe not in the context of financial freedom, but you'll hear somebody talking about how, you know what you really have to do? You need to just quit everything. You need to go climb Kilimanjaro. And once you do that, your eyes will be open to, you're like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? This is the most impractical bit of drivel that I've ever heard. So I like the fact that you're sharing real, relevant, and repeatable insights. So let's do this. Let's go 1 through 6, the 6 life-changing habits. I know you touched on a couple of them. Give us a recap, because we want people, whether they're listening in podcast form or the radio show or they're watching us on video, I want them to be able to, if they're note takers, to grab 1 through 6 and steal your material and go teach it.
Absolutely. Well, step number 1, though, is to dream, but not just a dream, dream big. As children, anything was possible. But as we started growing older, society taught us to be realistic. Why it won't work. Maybe you don't have the right education. Maybe you were born to the wrong family. I was born on the wrong side of the tracks. You know, it even comes down to my name. If you look at the French word Riopel, I only learned this a few years ago. There's 2 spellings, Riopelle and Riopel. And what I learned through some research is that if you were spelled Riopelle, that meant you were born to the wealthy Riopels, upper society. But if you're Riopel, that meant you were the poor, the, pay no attention Riopel. And that was, I look back at the history of my family, and that's kind of why our families were the way they were. And so you've got to dream big. If you know that there's something you are truly passionate about, dream big. I'm huge on vision boards. I even created an app to be able to have my vision boards. I can create them on my phone and have them in front of me every single day. That's step number 1. Step number 2, what we already talked about, find a mentor, find someone to model. I do not care, unless you're an Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos, if there's something you want to accomplish, someone's done it before you. So find out what worked, what didn't work. And this is why I'm huge on biographies. I love watching and reading biographies. Why? Because I don't want to just see the end result. I want to know their journey. I want to know the journey of the highs, the lows, I'm top of the world. Oh, I'm at the bottom of the ocean. Everything's going wrong, because that's where the greatest lessons. Step number 3, and this is the one that really is hard for people. See, you can have the greatest dreams in the world, the most passionate about it. You can have great mentors. But if you don't take action, you're not going anywhere. And that's the one that stalls so many people out. And the reason they get so stressed out is they get overwhelmed. And the reason they get overwhelmed is because they're 1,000 steps ahead of themselves, trying to figure out every single step. How's it going to work? You've got to come back to present. And as I love the saying, success is 1 step at a time. Check in with yourself. Take 1 step. Celebrate, which is step number 4. See, people get successful, and the reason they implode is they forget to acknowledge and celebrate their successes. They forget to honor themselves. Well, Robert, that's ego, that's bragging. No, that's nurturing your inner child. Most people have the saying go, if you had a best friend that treated you the way you treat yourself, they wouldn't be your friend for very long. But yet we beat ourselves up, merciful. Just we're tenacious about beating ourselves up. So you've got to celebrate. I'm a big believer of keeping a success journal. Every day I write down 5 of my successes from the day before. And over the years, that's morphed now. It's a success journal and gratitude journal. And so now when I wake up and I'm checking in with myself, it's one of my morning habits, my morning rituals. I'm like, from yesterday, what was a success? And what am I, or who am I grateful for? And whatever pops up first, I write them down. And now, like even people in my life, instead of just writing their name, if they popped in my mind, they popped in for a reason. So I now send them a message and just say, hey, I want to thank you and let you know today you came up in my gratitude. And I want to tell you why and thank you for being you. And I do it with no attachment. Some people respond, most don't. And that's okay. You see, it has nothing to do with them responding. It has them to do with me just expressing my gratitude.
Yeah.
Because if you focus on great things, more great things happen. But if you focus on the crap, you get more crap.
Yeah,
Plain
and
simple.
as you focus more on other people, it's pretty amazing to see what will happen even in your own world if you're able to. If I think it was Rick Warren in The Purpose-Driven Life, 50 million copies later, the question that was the thesis of that book is why on earth am I here? And the answer, I think on page 1 was, it's not about you. I just found it to be so simple and so profound. It was kind of mind blowing. And in trying to be one who focuses more on somehow helping somebody else. And if I am able to do something each day that somebody else says, man, did I ever need that? That's a pretty good day.
It is. And that's what people don't realize is that you may never know. One of the quotes I have is, when you meet someone, one of 2 things is always happening. You're either affecting them with your greatness or you're infecting them with your mediocrity. And it's whether you say anything or not, your energy transfers. And so if you're having a crappy day, that's going to transfer on to other people. And so by really looking at what you're grateful for and celebrating, and it doesn't have to always be like, big celebration. It could be like, you know what? Yesterday, I did the dishes. Yes. Yesterday, I actually made the bed. Woo. Well, Robert, that's small. No, a success is a success. It's only your mind that's making it small, medium, or large. But a success is a success. So that's step number 4. And step number 5 is believe in yourself. How many people have low self-esteem though? How many people have been kicked and knocked down and told they're not good enough? And then they believe it and I grew up being the ultimate people pleaser. I ask my audience, I say, raise your hand if you're a people pleaser. And I put both hands up, both feet up if I can. Because I thought that was a way to have happiness, try to please everybody. And boy, was that overwhelming. And then step number 6 is kind of surprises people. It's repeat the first 5 steps. Because here's what happens. When you set a dream, you find a mentor or someone to model, you take action, you celebrate that success. It's going to increase your belief in yourself, which allows you to now set bigger dreams, get greater mentors, take greater actions, have greater celebrations, have more belief in yourself, and it becomes a beautiful, beautiful perpetual circle. And that's the 6 steps.
Even, whether it's the context of financial freedom or some other project that you've set out for yourself in life, I love that kind of that continuum that takes you through. And the celebration concept is really powerful. We have a mindset in this culture that usually rains on everybody else's parade. Don't go on Twitter, folks. You're never going to find joy on social media. You're going to find fake. You're going to find anger. You're going to find all sorts of insincere communication from lonely people. We are the most connected culture in the history of mankind, and yet we are the most lonely. So if you're going to gauge your journey on the feedback of other people you don't know, then you're setting yourself up for misery.
Mhm.
As Robert's talking about bringing into your life people that you can observe and learn from, whether they are officially, in air quotes, a mentor or not, there are a lot of people you can learn a lot from without them even knowing it. You just watch how they conduct themselves. One of the things that I love most about the world of golf is that somebody said to me once that golf develops character, and I kind of beg to differ. I think golf reveals character, because you're out there for
Yes.
4.5, 5 hours. You get to see how somebody manages failure, because golf is a game of failure. You get to see how their temperament is geared, because I've seen people throw entire bags of clubs into lakes. You get to see their integrity on display. That ball was behind the tree a minute ago. How does he have a swing? Oh, he kicked it out into the fairway. That's interesting. You get to see, it took the guy 6 shots to finish the hole, and he says, "Put me down for a 4." And you're like, well, that's interesting. We will not be doing business together. And on and on and on you go. I think there are a lot of things you can learn from people without them even knowing it, if you're paying attention.
Yeah.
And I'm not here to suggest an epilogue to your book, but I might add one more life-changing habit to the end. So number 7 would be, pay attention to more than just yourself, because all around you, there are stories being shared. There are examples being set, some good, some not, but it's happening, and you don't have to pay anything for it. And you'll probably learn as much from somebody else that you don't know as you might from somebody you do know. So
Totally agree.
we would just be better observers of our surroundings. We would all come out ahead in the end. Robert, the book is called Success Left a Clue. As I mentioned at the introduction, Robert has instructed over 500,000 students around the world. Hopefully soon, when travel becomes regular again, or whatever form of regular it's going to be, you'll be able to do that in person. But I appreciate you sharing your insights with us today. And let me have you leave everybody with a way to get in touch with you, so that if they want more information, and I know you're doing a lot of online instruction as well, they can connect with you.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 easiest ways is Facebook, my fan page, which is you just put my name in, Robert Raymond, and it'll bring up my fan page. And the other one is you can just do robertraipel.com, and it'll take you to my website for Success Left a Clue. And Bill, look, I love to give. And if you're interested, I'd love for all of your listeners to be able to get the ebook version of my book at no cost, just as a gift for you allowing me to be on your show. Because I'm writing my second book now, which is The Authority Key. And I struggled writing the first book. I got to tell you, it was a 15-year process, and wanting it to be perfect and realizing that it's the journey. And so now I'm excited about getting the second book out, because it's just, again, you said it, one person, and you may never know. I'm big on the ripple effect. One of my greatest pleasures is when a student comes up to me and they say, "Do you remember when you said this? Well, here's how it changed my life." And I don't even know the people I've impacted. And the best part is I don't have to know. Yeah. So I just love to be able to give and help people in any way I can to really go for that life they truly want and that they really, truly deserve to have. So,
well, we will put a link in the podcast notes to successleftaclue.com, and you can take advantage of Robert's generous offer to download the digital version of book number 1 as we await book number 2. Let us know when it comes out, man. It's great to meet you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on your show.